What up? Wade here. Welcome back to the Wade Alter Show. So today what I want to talk about is masculinity and becoming a man in modern day society, becoming a man in the hashtag Me Too movement and all the craziness that's gone on since this all kind of started a few years ago. And just, it's really been since the 1970s and the 1980s of the feminist movement and things like that. And how we as men today can still find our place and what it means to be a man. And so where this kind of was inspired from is I was having a conversation a few days ago with a guy who's a dating coach. He's, really successful, but it kind of is a different sort of, area than what I came from. So my background was really cold approach pickup, like going out in whatever country in the world you're in, whatever city you're in, and being able to see that girl and going up to her and convey yourself in a way with confidence and dominance and assertiveness and decisiveness, masculinity to attract that girl, and then be a man, be a leader, and be able to lead that forward into whatever path you want to take, whether that's having some fun for the night, whether that's moving it towards becoming a girlfriend. And since then, here I am 12 years later and have a lot of marriages that I can attribute to the success that clients that have worked with me have used to build their relationships. And he was telling me, he's like, man, this is a skill that every man needs. And so for him, like I said, he's like, in the last couple of years, I've done a lot of Tinder game. He's kind of serial monogamous, things like that. But he's like, you know what? This is what every man truly needs. Just that ability to see a woman that you're attracted to and go up to her and not settling for things like, oh yeah, Sarah at work, or settling for your social circle, or settling for just whatever you can find on the dating apps and things like that. I mean, I feel like I'm so old school in the fact that when I was single, the last time I was single was before things like Tinder even existed. And I think it's just another way that modern technology is making people soft. It's making men soft, especially. And so what does it mean to be a man? On the other side of things, I look at guys today that are single and I'm like, man, it is tougher. It's scarier. And the fact that this whole hashtag Me Too thing, in a way, it weaponizes just scandal, and it weaponizes the thing where, like, I saw recently where the U.S. Attorney General of New York City, all of a sudden, he's been a civil servant for like 30 years, 25 years, and in a matter of 3 hours, his entire 30-year career is flipped upside down, and he has to resign because of things that happened in his past. And a lot of these things happened 10, 20 years ago. And now I want to put a disclaimer out there that I agree that the Harvey Weinsteins and the crazy, the guy on the Today Show that was doing this weird shit where he's locking women in his office, that's sketchy, that's scary, that's crazy. And I'm glad that that behavior was uncovered through this movement and they got their due justice because of that. But it's also led to some pretty hardcore repercussions and byproducts when it comes to just being a man and your ability to be dominant, to be masculine, to be assertive. And the thing is these sort of traits, they come from thousands and thousands of years of us developing as humans. So much has changed just in the last 30 years or the last 100 years. And if you look at Moore's Law, how things are going to evolve even faster and faster with technology, it's only leading to more confusion and guys ending up just kind of settling for complacency. And I think one of the most extreme examples of this is if you look at Japan, there's this whole culture today of the millennials of that era. One, the men are just like falling in love with robots instead of meeting actual women. And there's this sort of neutrality when it comes to sexuality. There's this sort of gender fluidity, which is not bad either. But again, it just leads to confusion. And so if you have any of those thoughts of, okay, where do I fit in here? What is my role as a man in modern day society? I could get into all the dating side of things, of what women are attracted to, the high status behavior, the decisiveness. They want to feel safe. And a lot of this comes, again, evolutionarily from the fact that if they have kids, they can't watch the kids and you as well. And so that's what they're just attracted to on an animalistic level. It was cool. I just finished up Jordan Peterson's book, The 12 Rules for Life, related to living life in chaos or something like that. It's an interesting book. Some people love it. Some people can't get through it. So I'm not going to, stamp it with the full recommendation, but I'm glad that I read it. And it was interesting, especially chapter 1. He talks about how lobsters, and they're these creatures that were developed, 2 million, 3 million years ago on the evolutionary ladder. And even back then, there was this sort of dominance hierarchy where your biochemistry changes if you're at the top of the hierarchy or if you're at the bottom. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy either way. So if you are on the low end of the totem pole, it leads to you having that sort of your biochemistry, you feel sad, you're depressed because you don't have that freedom, you don't have that power. And it leads to you coming across in that low status way, which makes more people respond to you that way. Other men pushing you down and women not being attracted to you. On the other end, the rich keep getting richer. So if you're on the high end of that status, what leads to is men respecting you more, you feeling better about that respect, you gaining confidence, you getting success with women, you seeing them respond to you, attracted to you, and that gives you even more confidence, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so much of what I used to teach was how to jettison you into that positive feedback loop from first learning what high status behaviors are, things like, having good tonality. This is good tonality versus this is not good tonality. Things like taking up space, having a strong presence, not being afraid to get in other people's space, being assertive, speaking your mind, being opinionated, valuing your opinion over other people, valuing your opinion instead of worrying about what other people think of you. And I'm going to get into in a second here how to really develop and hone those sort of traits as a man. But first, just to hammer home the point, is the fact that if 2 million years ago there was a dominance hierarchy already then, it's still alive today. And we have that animalistic nature within us. So it behooves you to learn how to develop these core traits and not holding back in this post-feminist Me Too era. Again, as a man, what is masculinity? It is that being on your path. David Data, Way of the Superior Man, masculinity, it's that polarity. You're like an arrow and you're moving towards the target. You're going for what you want. You have this unwavering confidence and self-trust in yourself, and you're willing to make mistakes. You must be willing to get that feedback, to not worry about what other people think of you, and piss a couple people off. Be a little bit of polarizing. That's what's going to lead to more success in every area of your life. It's going to lead to getting the things that you want. It's going to lead to enjoying life more, because as a man, what we enjoy most is the freedom, is the success that comes from that moment of exhilaration when you work your ass off and you go, it's like that orgasm in life that comes in. In Tony Robbins' seminars, when he does Date with Destiny, there's a segment for men to really kind of unearth their hidden masculinity. And what he does is he plays the Braveheart scene where he's like, they cannot take our freedom. And everyone yells freedom as loud as they can. And that's just a huge part of being a man. That's why we love sports and the competitive nature, because it just leads to that, feeling great, feeling, just spent. And yes, like I said, an orgasm of life that comes from the buildup of working your damn ass off towards really important things, the competitive nature, and then the success that ultimately comes from that. And it's been interesting lately because I've really taken a deep dive into this area when I kind of reignited the sort of relationship advisor role with some of my clients and going, okay, where is the masculine and the feminine at today? How does that play out in a marriage or a long-term relationship? It made me remember back when I was a dating coach and really on the vanguard for the men's movement. And this was pre #MeToo and all this stuff sort of happening. But it really was, okay, how do us men post the feminist movement still maintain that masculinity in a world where, yes, I totally agree that in the workplace, we need equal opportunity for those situations to come into place. Because I think, again, Jordan Peterson has great arguments for this, and that the reason there isn't equal pay is more demographically explained, related to things like women getting pregnant and how the most high-level positions like CEOs or high-level attorneys and things like this, it takes 20 to 30 years of a commitment. And so at some point, somebody needs to go, okay, there's more to life than just my career. And women in general value things like family more, and they value relationships more. And that's not a social conditioning thing. This is evolutionarily been like this for thousands and thousands of years, hunter-gatherers, and even back into the primates and before then as well. And to be totally honest with you, as I was building the business, I kind of forgot about this whole side of things because I was just focused on growing the business. I was focused on, I guess, myself in a way and really like building this. And also doing more work with high-level one-on-one coaching. Those people that are at that level, they're already pretty self-developed. All my clients, I would say, if I look at the men, I have both men and women in there, but the men, I'm like, yes, pretty much all of them, and I know almost all of them listen to this podcast, so what's up, guys? They've achieved what I would consider a high level of masculinity, and hopefully I could be a part of that with them, but it's also just the fact that when you do a lot of self-development, when you're working on yourself, when you're trying to excel, that leads to things like taking personal responsibility for your life. It leads to being more selfish and achieving the things that you want. It leads to that decisiveness, being a leader, and going for what you want so that you get the freedom that you deserve as a man. But staying in that world where my clients are at a high level and all my friends that I've developed over the years, really cultivating them to be people that inspire me, that are also at a high level and success, as well as that masculine dominance. I forgot about the fact that, I wasn't like this at an earlier age. I had to really cultivate and learn these traits for myself. And if I look back, those traits, of becoming more decisive in every situation, of feeling comfortable in my own skin, no matter where I'm at in the world, of being able to assert myself to whether that's negotiate a lower price on some sort of service, negotiate to get into first class, or talk to a beautiful woman and not be afraid or not feeling like I'm putting her up on a pedestal. Those skills are what led to all the success that I have today and the ability to be as free as I can be, and the peace that I have, the peace of mind that I have. It all came from those traits. And so I want to inspire you. I want to motivate you to take it further, to really hit the next level for yourself. If you feel like you aren't as decisive as you could be, if you aren't taking complete responsibility for your life, that doesn't mean you have to identify with where you're at. It doesn't mean you have to stay in the shit of what your life is today. But the only way you can get back up, dust off the dirt, and start taking your life to the next level is by taking responsibility. And from that place of control, that's what leads to you creating the freedom that you want. And I don't want to just rant here about you need to take responsibility, you need to be more dominant. What does that actually mean? These are all sort of words that have a lot of stigma associated with them in modern day society. And they're also words that mean completely different things to every single one of us. So I got a couple books for you, and I've mentioned some of these before. I think a great one is Winning Through Intimidation. Every man needs to know how to intimidate. And that's a loaded word as well. What it really comes down to is creating leverage for yourself. When you have a situation of leverage, you're willing to do whatever it takes. So for example, let's say you're negotiating a higher salary. If you have other offers on the table, so you go out there and you find other companies that you'd like to work with, then you can go in and you can really assert yourself. You can have a fine line. Be hard on the problem, soft on the people, but you can be firm and assert yourself and say, hey, this is what I deserve. It's the same thing in a relationship. If you develop the skill set of knowing how to, when you see a beautiful woman, you're able to go up and talk to her. That doesn't mean you have to shove this in your girlfriend's face, but when you have that ability, that skill set, which takes time, don't get me wrong, it takes years. On average, I've seen people take 4 to 5 years to get really good at putting in the time of getting those approaches under your belt, getting rejected, learning and developing that skill set. What better skill is there? If you could spend 5 years to have true power of seeing the woman that you want and being able to turn that into a relationship, what better power is there? And then, like I said, when you're in that relationship with your girlfriend and all of a sudden she crosses a boundary, let's say she talks to you in a way that you don't like, or she's flirting with some guy, or a certain behavior that she has crosses your boundary. Because you have that leverage, you can speak your mind and you can say, hey, you just crossed a boundary. Because the only way you can assert your boundaries is if you're willing to lose the situation. If you're afraid to lose, you're going to compromise. And so building that leverage is what Winning Through Intimidation is all about. The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, my most recommended book. If you haven't read it yet and you've been listening to this podcast since the beginning, you're missing out. Read The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem. I prefer the actual book. I love audiobooks, but the actual book, it's longer. The audiobook is like some attenuated version. For whatever reason, they cut out certain sections in the audiobook, but there's a whole section on self-responsibility. And so much of being the man is you're the rock. You're the centered man. You're the rock that the waves roll against in life, whether this is in your relationship, whether this is in your business, as a leader, just becoming that centered, rooted man. I think also this is why travel is so important. It's the same reason that I think starting a business is one of the best forms of self-development, because you have so much volatility and you have so much unpredictability and so much risk that it forces you to build that intestinal fortitude to really develop that sort of dominant masculinity. In a book I've recommended many times, The Way of the Superior Man by David Deida, just to understand what masculine polarity is and feminine polarity, and realizing where on the spectrum you are, where you need to go, what areas need to refine. We need both the masculine and the feminine, but I feel if I look at an aggregate of where society is at today, we've swung way too far to the feminine, and it's time for you as a man, anyone listening to this podcast, to swing that masculinity back, to bring it back, to embrace that. There's nothing wrong with it. It feels good as a man to be a leader. It feels good to lead. It feels good to take action and push through some shit and then come out on the other side successful. It's good to compete. It's good to build that level. It's good to assert yourself and know how to manipulate the situation. Manipulation is not a bad thing. Manipulate, just molding and bending things in a way to get what you want out of life. And so if you took one thing away from this podcast, what I would say is what masculinity is today is still what it was 50 years ago, 5 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. This is an animalistic, evolutionary, instinctual behavior of knowing what feels right, But then coming from that place, understanding the culture that we live in. And I'd love to hear your feedback and your questions on this. I'm going to throw this up on YouTube as well. So that would be a great place to comment or shoot me an email, support@wadealters.com, related to what are the specific situations you're dealing with where you feel like you can't bring out that masculinity. The way I look at masculinity, it's coming from an inside out understanding. So you develop these things, and maybe in the sort of outer game aspect of things, how you interact with women in the workplace, or the conversations you have with a girl that you're dating or the girl that you're married to, or the conversations that you're having in a political discourse, or with people overhearing you, or even with your girlfriend or the woman that you're dating, is there's ways to sort of navigate in that context. But I would say when it comes to yourself, when it comes to shining the mirror on yourself, when it comes to the deeper level inner game aspect of who you need to become, that decisiveness, that certainty, that centeredness, that being comfortable in your own skin, building leverage, going to the gym and being that aggressive, throwing some heavy shit around, it makes you feel like a man, and that's never going to change. If anything, society, it's going to evolve even faster moving forward, but that one thing that becomes the rock that you can lean on is knowing what makes you feel good as a man specifically. And like I said, that is that competitive nature. That's not going to go away, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a negative thing, but it's learning how to harness that to achieve big things. But even more importantly, enjoying the process along the way of who you become and inspiring the people around you. Boom, there you go. I like to call it #men2, not just me too. So hopefully you enjoyed today's podcast. Definitely shoot me a message if you have any feedback on this one. This is something I'd like to dive in deeper. And as always, enjoy.